To culminate our session on women, religion, and culture, we are honored to invite to the podium our featured speaker, Dr. Tanya Williams. Dr. Williams is the Deputy Vice President for Institutional Diversity and Community Engagement at Union Theological Seminary in the city of New York. She previously served as Associate Dean of Students for Diversity and Inclusion at Mount Holyoke College, and has 18 years of diversity, inclusion, and social justice programming and facilitation experience in higher education. She has taught courses such as Social Diversity in Education, Exploring Differences and Common Ground through Intergroup Dialogue, and the Psychology of Racism. Additionally, she has served as a lead facilitator with Leadership, a national organization committed to creating leaders with integrity, for 16 years, and as a senior trainer with Class Action, a national organization committed to ending classism. Dr. Williams holds a doctorate in social justice education from the University of Massachusetts at Amherst, where her dissertation focused on US-born African American and Black women in a process of liberation from internalized racism. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our featured speaker, Dr. Tanya Williams.
We've come this far by faith, leaning on the Lord, trusting in His holy word. He's never failed us yet. Turn around, we've come this far by faith.
Amen.
I grew up singing that inspiring but limiting and sexist hymn Sunday after Sunday in my relatively small Baptist church in Houston, Texas. On Sundays, we found it listed in our church bulletin. I think it was hymn number 151 in the Broadman hymnal. My sister and I would dramatically roll our eyes, loathing the thought of singing it again. We would somehow drag our youthful spirits through it, unknowingly writhing with disgust at the imagery that created an only male God, who was all-powerful, all-knowledgeable, and apparently our only hope. I didn't know it then, but we were resisting the best way we knew how. Resisting a culture of maleness, male supremacy, and patriarchy that had infiltrated a sincere expression of faith that helped a people and a community survive in the midst of racist struggle and oppression. It was a confusing lesson to learn and a strange culture to interpersonally navigate. A culture that wanted to make sure that my racial self felt important, but that my female self knew her place. I could list many more hymns and practices of the Black Baptist church that I was raised in that taught me that I was expected to be less than whole, less than human, and that only beings that had any right to stand from a pulpit and deliver their truth from this male God were men. Sunday after Sunday, I watched women deliver pithy announcements from a place below the pulpit. I watched women wash dishes after the men had the honor of serving the elements during the Lord's Supper, also known as communion, and be expected to wear dresses, heels, and makeup to beautify the house of the Lord. I must be honest. I hesitate to share my reflection with you. A Black Southern woman raised in the Black church in a predominantly Black community, speaking to a mixed race audience in a white space in a white community, lest my story become the only experience that some will have with an incorrect construction of a monolithic Black church and write the artificial image of the singular black church as backwards in the dark ages and unintelligent. And at the same time, in my continued liberation seeking for myself and this world, it requires showing the complexity of spaces and communities that often get stereotyped and limited to one-dimensional constructions is the fault of the oppression and not the community itself. And in all honesty, it was the realization that oppressed communities can also be the purveyors of oppression that began helping me to own my earlier resistance in a new way. While holding on to all of the powerful things that small black church in Texas nurtured in me. That thinking and analysis helped me begin to heal my internalized sexism that had its roots in that small church, while at the same time having my church help me heal my internalized racism that had its roots in the white supremacist world outside the church doors. It is the intersection of the faith that I learned in this church and the culture, more specifically the blackness, that opened a new level of resistance, one of strength and compassion. Using the strength of blackness and black culture helped me return myself to myself, even in the midst of sexism and limitation. Remembering that an ancestor believed that I would one day exist and therefore decided to survive the Middle Passage. Remembering that someone wanted to make space for me, so they rallied against a system of brutal chattel slavery by choosing day after day to draw breath and create their own liberating forms of Christianity that spoke to generations and helped sustain my ancestors, grandparents, and parents through years of dehumanizing racism and oppression. Those examples tell me that I have the power to create a space for realities that might not exist yet. And it creates a recognition that I can and do have wholeness in God, where I can find and assert my voice and choose a faith and a spirituality that lifts me up as valuable and precious. I have learned that I can create my own feminist stand of crafting a spirituality that works for me. And it gives me strength to fight and hold my ground for my 14-year-old niece to get to create her own practice of faith and recognize her own divinity earlier than I did. Arundhati Roy is quoted as saying, "Another world is not only possible, she is on her way. On a quiet day, I can hear her breathing." Let us use our feminist acts of faith in presence of love, grace, and beauty that is ever expanding to create that world.